WHMIS stands for Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. WHMIS first became law in 1988. It is a comprehensive system designed to provide health and safety. Welcome to Part 1 of WHMIS 2015. This presentation is an introductory module on the WHMIS legislative requirements and the incorporation of elements of the Global Harmonized System. Today you will learn how to define WHMIS and the Global Harmonized System, how WHMIS aligns with GHS, your responsibilities as a worker to work safely, the employer and supplier responsibilities to ensure safety in the workplace. WHMIS stands for Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. WHMIS first became law in 1988. It is a comprehensive system designed to provide health and safety information on hazardous products used in Canadian workplaces. It is a Canada-wide system designed to give employers and workers information about hazardous materials in the workplace.
GHS is the Global Harmonized System, which is a worldwide hazardous communication system.
Canada aligned WHMIS with GHS in 2015 and incorporated GHS elements, resulting in reclassification of the previous classes of hazards and identification of new classes of hazards. It is known as WHMIS 2015. The outcome is that all Canadian workplaces now have a common set of rules for classifying hazards, common requirements for labeling products, and for information to be provided for all hazardous products sold, distributed, and imported into Canada. Legislative changes required workplaces to have WHMIS 2015 fully implemented by December 2018. WHMIS incorporates both federal and provincial laws and applies to all workplaces where hazardous products are present, including business and industry, all workplaces covered by the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and to all federal government workplaces. What does WHMIS stand for? Please select one answer and click Submit. The correct answer is B. Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. The purpose of WHMIS is to keep all workers safe. 1. It lets you know about health and safety hazards associated with hazardous chemicals present in the workplace. 2. Provides information for safe use of products you will be handling, using, or disposing of. 3. Ensure you are educated and receive training so that you fully understand the risks, precautions to take, and emergency measures. 4. Reduce the risk of injury or illness to all workers. Try this true or false knowledge check. WHMIS is a provincially specific workplace policy. It is not regulated federally or countrywide. The answer is false. This is regulated federally, from which the provinces and territories implement specific legislation. WHMIS stipulates standardized requirements for supplier and workplace products labels and for the information supplied on safety data sheets, and WHMIS defines the clear roles and responsibilities of suppliers, employers, and workers, and the education and training requirements for workers. The Global Harmonized System and the Hazardous Products Regulations set out specific hazard classification criteria.
GHS breaks down hazards into 3 groups. Each hazard group includes several hazard classes that have specific hazardous properties. 1. Health. 2. Physical. 3. Environmental. Each group of hazards has several classes within it.
WHMIS 2015 applies to 2 major groups of hazards. 1. Physical hazards group, based on the physical or chemical properties of the product, such as flammability, reactivity, or corrosivity to metals. 2. Health hazards group, based on the ability of the product to cause a health effect, such as eye irritation, may cause allergy or asthma symptoms, or may cause cancer.
It is important to note that the GHS Environmental Hazard Group has not been adopted in the regulations for WHMIS 2015. However, you may see the environmental classes listed on labels and safety data sheets, SDSs, including information about environmental hazards if allowed by WHMIS 2015.
What are hazard classes?
Hazard classes are a way of grouping together products that have similar properties. Most of the hazard classes are common to GHS and will be used worldwide by all countries that have adopted GHS. Some hazard classes are specific to WHMIS 2015. Generally, each hazard class of hazardous products must include a pictogram. Note that some hazard classes, such as combustible dust and simple asphyxiants, including carbon dioxide and helium, do not have pictograms, and other label elements to indicate the hazard that is present and what precautionary measures must be taken. These hazards have the characteristic of occurring following acute or repeated exposure and have an adverse effect on the health of a person exposed to it, including an injury or resulting in the death of that person. If a product is classified in this class, the hazard statement will describe the nature of the hazard. For example, acute toxicity. These products are fatal, toxic, or harmful if inhaled following skin contact or if swallowed. Flammable gases and aerosols, flammable liquids and solids, oxidizing gases, gases under pressure. These products can catch fire and cause serious physical injuries to eyes, skin, and lungs.
The category tells you about how hazardous the product is. Each hazard class contains at least one category. The hazard categories are assigned a number, for example, 1, 2, etc. Categories may also be called types. Category 1 is always the most hazardous within that class. Category 2 within the same hazard class is more hazardous than Category 3, and so on.
There are a few exceptions to this rule. For example, for the gases under pressure hazard class, the hazard categories are compressed gas, liquefied gas, refrigerated liquefied gas, and dissolved gas. These classes relate to the physical state of the gas when packaged and do not describe the degree of hazard.
In addition, reproductive toxicity also has categories 1 and 2, which relate to effects on fertility and/or the unborn child. Effects on or via lactation is considered a related hazard within the reproductive toxicity class. As previously discussed, WHMIS has incorporated GHS elements. Click on each of the following standardized items that are a part of this integration. Select as many as apply. Correct. All of the answers are correct. Some products are covered by different legislation and are excluded under WHMIS 2015. These are explosives as defined in the Explosives Act, cosmetic, device, drug, or food as defined in the Food and Drugs Act, pest control products as defined in the Pest Control Products Act, consumer products as defined in the Canada Consumer Product Safety Act, wood or products made of wood, nuclear substances within the meaning of the Nuclear Safety and Control Act that are radioactive, tobacco and tobacco products as defined in the Tobacco Act, manufactured articles. Note that while a product may be exempt from the requirement to have a WHMIS label and SDS, employers must still provide education and training on health effects, safe use, and storage. Which classes are covered under WHMIS 2015? A. Explosives. B. Physical. C. Environmental. D. Health. E. B and D. F. All of the above. Sorry, that's incorrect. The correct answer is E. Physical and health hazards only are covered under WHMIS 2015. Let's review the roles and responsibilities for suppliers, employers, and workers to comply with WHMIS 2015. Suppliers, defined as persons who, in the course of business, sell or import a hazardous product, are required to identify whether their products are hazardous products, and prepare labels and SDSs and provide these to purchasers of hazardous products intended for use in a workplace. Ensure that information is current and update labels and SDSs with any new product information. Employers must ensure that all hazardous products are properly labeled and that up-to-date SDSs are readily available to workers. Employers must also develop specific education programming on WHMIS and safety in the workplace. Provide worker education and training on safe handling, use, and disposal of hazardous products. Train occupational health and safety committee members. Ensure appropriate control measures are in place to protect the health and safety of workers. Assess and update the WHMIS education program at least annually.
Workers are required to participate in WHMIS training programs. If you do not understand what you have learned or need more information, you are required to identify this and seek information from your supervisor. Workers also need to take necessary steps to protect themselves and their coworkers by adopting safe work practices and participate in identifying and controlling hazards. You, the worker, must attend training and understand the components of WHMIS.
In this drag and drop knowledge check, drag the blue boxes identifying a role to the correct box of the corresponding responsibility for SDS in the workplace. Correct. Both the federal and provincial WHMIS legislation is enforced by the Provincial Ministry of Labor. Exceptions relate to federal workplaces. There are 5 pieces of legislation that regulate WHMIS 2015. These are:
the Hazardous Products Act, HPA, places duties on suppliers who sell or import a hazardous material for use in a workplace in Canada to provide labels and SDS to their customers.
The Hazardous Products Regulation, HPR, defines what a controlled product is and also sets the information that the supplier is required to put on a label and SDS, safety data sheet, and contains the name of the chemicals which must be identified on an SDS.
The Hazardous Material Information Review Act and Regulation establishes a federal review commission that will rule on claims for exemptions from disclosing confidential business information. The regulation sets out the criteria the commission will use when assessing the validity of claims for exemption.
The Global Harmonized System, GHS, federal and provincial legislation has been amended to include the Global Harmonized System. The WHMIS regulation in provinces and territories includes the provisions of the Global Harmonized System. Inspectors have the authority to make sure that the employer requirements specified in the occupational health and safety legislation are being followed. Inspectors may enter a workplace if they have reasonable grounds to believe that an activity related to WHMIS is being conducted, or that a hazardous product is located in a workplace. In some cases, inspectors may be determining if products are arriving from suppliers with the required labels and SDSs. In other cases, they may be determining if there is a compliant WHMIS program in the workplace. Inspectors may need to speak to workers to confirm that education and training has taken place. Workers should be able to answer these questions for every hazardous product they work with.
What are the hazards of the product? How do I protect myself from those hazards? What do I do in case of an emergency? Where can I get further information?
This concludes your Introduction to WHMIS 2015 Part 1. Please also ensure you complete Part 2 of WHMIS 2015 on the Global Harmonized System, classifications of hazards, labels, and safety data sheets. Welcome back for Part 2 of WHMIS 2015, which will cover the global harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals. This presentation is brought to you by Surge Learning. In the first module, you were introduced to the global harmonized system and the federal and provincial legislation that cover WHMIS 2015. This legislation is in place to protect the health and safety of workers in Canadian workplaces. You also learned that employers have a responsibility to provide employee training on labels and safety data sheets of hazardous products in your workplace. What you will learn today is the labeling requirements and also the standardized sections of the safety data sheets. As discussed in the introduction to WHMIS 2015, physical hazards groups are based on the physical or chemical properties of the product, such as flammability, reactivity, or corrosivity to metals. As a review from Part 1, health hazard classes identify the health hazards associated with the use of chemicals. Some of the health hazards are serious and immediate, while others are more insidious and may take longer for the health symptoms to appear. It is critical to ensure that if you are using chemicals that may cause health hazards, you are trained on the proper use, PPE, precautions, what to do if you encounter exposure, and storage and handling recommendations. Hazards must be communicated to workers before the workers can use products that are WHMIS regulated. This communication is done through training, by reviewing the information on labels and safety data sheets. The GHS facilitates the communication of hazards by the use of symbols that are used worldwide. In Canada, labels and safety data sheets must be available in both English and French. Under the Occupational Health and Safety Act, employers do have the responsibility of making sure vulnerable workers and workers that may not speak English or French have this information conveyed to them in a way that they understand. The use of the GHS symbols is a way of enhancing communication. It is very important that you ask questions of your supervisor whenever you are not sure about using a product. WHMIS 2015 stipulates standardized requirements for supplier and workplace products labels. Supplier labels are required to provide the information in both French and English. Let's now spend a few minutes reviewing the information that labels must contain. 1. Product identifier.
Is the product name as it appears on the container and the safety data sheet.
2. Hazard pictograms.
Shows the hazard classification of the product, such as contains gas under pressure, may explode if heated.
3. Signal words.
The words danger or warning indicate the severity of the hazard. The danger signal word indicates relatively severe or immediate hazard. The warning signal word indicates a less severe hazard.
4. Hazard statements.
Standardized statements of all hazards associated with the product.
5. Precautionary statements.
Precautions to be taken to minimize or prevent adverse effects from exposure to the product and include PPE to be used, emergency and first aid measures, as well as storage requirements, information on how to respond to an accidental spill, and disposal of chemical.
6. Supplier identifier.
Provides the name of the company which made, packaged, sold, or imported the product.
7. Supplemental information such as the route of exposure. A workplace label is required when a hazardous product is transferred or poured into another container, such as a spray bottle, or a supplier label becomes lost or unreadable. A workplace label requires the following information: product name matching the safety data sheets, SDS. Safe handling precautions may include pictograms or other supplier label information. A reference to the SDS. Requirements for workplace labels are regulated by your local provincial or territorial jurisdiction. Check with your jurisdiction for more information. As a worker, you have responsibilities too. Review this list and check off all of the items that you are required to do in relation to labels. Correct. The GHS uses 10 pictograms to communicate hazards associated with various substances. Pictograms consist of a symbol on a white background framed with a red border and represents a distinct hazard. Each chemical that is WHMIS 2015 regulated must generally include a hazard pictogram. However, as mentioned in Module 1, asphyxiants, including carbon dioxide and helium and combustible dust, do not require a pictogram. Labels may contain more than one hazard pictogram, depending on the number of hazards associated with the product. The label provides the hazard pictogram, and more detailed information is found in the safety data sheet. This slide depicts the pictograms that we are about to discuss to be well acquainted with the hazards they identify. The symbol within the pictogram is a flame with a line underneath it.
This symbol indicates that materials or products with this pictogram can ignite easily and burn rapidly if they are not stored and handled properly. They should be handled with extra care and kept away from heat and open flames at all costs. Understand that for a fire to burn, it requires oxygen, heat, and fuel, so these should never be brought together around these materials. These can be flammable liquids, solids, and aerosols. The flame pictogram is also used on products that emit flammable gases, such as pyrophoric or chemicals that ignite within minutes of exposure, self-heating, self-reacting, and organic peroxides.
Flame over circle.
This symbol on a chemical label means that the substance is an oxidizer. Oxidizing materials are materials that give off increased levels of oxygen or other oxidizing chemicals which greatly increase the risk of a fire or explosion, even under mild conditions. These materials do not burn themselves, but will improve the likelihood of combustible materials around them catching fire, such as wood, textiles, or other flammable materials with lower levels of heat needed. Do not store these next to flammable or combustible materials.
The skull over crossbones symbol.
This pictogram, for acute toxicity and potentially fatal, is used in materials labeling to warn you that the relevant product has potential to be fatal, toxic, or extremely harmful, even with a limited exposure or a one-time exposure. This can be exposure through contact with skin, inhalation, or swallowing. Proper handling should be taken extremely seriously with these materials. Examples include inhalation of high-acid vapors may cause immediate burning of the mouth and airway leading to the lungs. High level of exposure to solvents and dust particles may cause severe respiratory distress and severe skin irritation or injury.
The exclamation mark symbol.
This hazard pictogram represents a lesser level of health risk from exposure, including an allergic reaction, irritation, inflammation, coughing, etc. These effects are in general treatable and have less of a risk for chronic health effects compared to materials under the skull and bones pictogram, but you still need to take precautions when handling chemicals with this pictogram and wear appropriate PPE. For example, solvents and other chemicals, when absorbed through the skin, may cause dizziness or drowsiness and skin injury. Dust particles, when inhaled, may cause irritation to the respiratory tract, dryness of the throat, and cough.
The health hazard symbol.
Chemicals with this hazard pictogram may cause health problems over a prolonged period of time. These include long-term effects such as chronic diseases, sickness, damage to bodily organs, cancer, infertility, genetic defects, aspiration hazard, and more. Examples of chemicals that may cause the health hazards described include benzene, beryllium, asbestos, vinyl chloride, and arsenic. Appropriate use of PPE is a control workers must take when handling these types of chemicals to minimize the risk of these long-term health effects.
Match the pictogram with the hazard it represents. Correct. This symbol of corrosion.
This pictogram signifies that the material can chemically react to material or skin, causing skin burns and serious eye injuries. This damage is devastating, and chemicals react immediately. Extreme caution must be taken when handling these materials, with proper PPE worn at all times when doing so.
The symbol of an exploding bomb.
This hazard pictogram is used in labels to clearly signify that the materials are very unstable and can react explosively, and risk combusting when handled improperly and in certain conditions, including changes in increased pressure, if accidentally dropped, or at elevated temperatures. These materials should be handled only by professionals under safe conditions. Proper storage of these materials is paramount, as some may be sensitive to heat or light and pose a massive risk for serious injury or death. Some examples include ammonium perchlorate, hydrogen peroxide solutions, 91% by weight. Some of these self-reactive chemicals can also react with water and release gases which may be deadly at low air concentrations. Examples include sodium or potassium phosphide, which release phosphine gas on contact with water, and alkali metal cyanide salts, such as sodium or potassium cyanide, which slowly release deadly hydrogen cyanide gas on contact with water.
This symbol of a gas cylinder.
This pictogram is used to identify that the gas contained in the cylinder or other similar storage device is under high pressure and will be sensitive to punctures or leaks, providing the risk of explosions or allowing the cylinder to turn into a makeshift projectile. Oftentimes, the gases contained within these cylinders are hazardous themselves, so always be aware of attached labeling. Inspect all incoming cylinders before storing to ensure they are undamaged and properly labeled. Be sure they are not giving off odors, visible fumes, or hissing sounds. Store compressed gas cylinders separately, away from processing and handling areas and from incompatible materials. Separate storage can minimize personal injury and damage in case of fires, spills, or leaks. Many compressed gases can undergo dangerous reactions if they come in contact with incompatible materials, gases, liquids, or solids, so store them apart from each other. Store in areas which are well ventilated and dry, fire resistant and supplied with suitable firefighting equipment, including sprinklers where appropriate, away from electrical circuits and ignition sources such as sparks, flames, or hot surfaces.
This symbol of biohazardous materials.
This hazard pictogram is used to signify that the material contains organisms harmful to our health by causing disease or other serious illnesses. These organisms include bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. This symbol will also be placed on containers for medical waste. Biohazardous infectious materials are primarily found in healthcare facilities, laboratories, research facilities, veterinary practices, and hospitals. Infections can be transmitted through direct or indirect contact, droplet, airborne, vehicle, or vector route. Workers exposed to these infectious materials must wear PPE appropriate to the mode of transmission of the infectious agent. The risks associated with biohazardous materials are serious, and if you fear you have been exposed, seek medical attention immediately.
This symbol of the environment.
GHS also defines an environmental hazards group. This group and its classes was not adopted in WHMIS 2015. However, you may see the environmental classes listed on labels and safety data sheets, SDSs, including information about environmental hazards allowed by WHMIS 2015.
What does this pictogram identify? Incorrect if not all choices are selected, as this pictogram indicates the risk of infection, which requires the use of PPE as protection, and the pictogram is found on containers designated for disposal of biohazardous materials such as blood. Now that you have a good understanding of the importance of understanding the information contained in labels for hazardous workplace products, let's focus on the Safety Data Sheets, SDS. The Global Harmonized System Standards require that each SDS consist of 16 specific sections. The safety data sheets are summaries that provide information about the hazards of a product and safety precautions. The safety data sheets provide details on identification, controls, treatment, properties, handling, storage and transport, toxicological information, disposal, and other information. Every product that is classified as a hazardous product under WHMIS 2015 that has intended use, handling, and storage in its workplaces in Canada must have an SDS. Let's review each section. Additional requirements for WHMIS 2015 for Standardized Safety Data Sheets, SDS, include SDSs must be in both English and French, be accurate at the time of each sale or import, and updated to include significant new information. Statement, trade secret. If the safety data sheet provides a concentration range, it must also provide, immediately following the concentration range, a statement to the effect that the actual concentration is withheld as a trade secret. The 16-section format includes specific information on 1. Product identifier, 2. Hazard identification, 3. Information on ingredients, 4. First aid measures, 5. Firefighting measures, 6. Accidental release measures, 7. Handling and storage, 8. Personal protection, 9. Physical and chemical properties, 10. Stability and reactivity, 11. Toxicological information, 12. Ecological information, 13. Disposal considerations, 14. Transport information, 15. Regulatory information, and 16. Date of the latest revision of the SDS. Which are requirements for SDS? A. 14 types of information. B. English and French. C. Safety precautions only. D. Trade secrets statements. E. B and D. F. All of the above. Incorrect. The correct answer is E. 16 format information sections are required, and product hazard and safety precautions must both be included on SDS. In summary, this module provided an overview of the classification of hazards, labels including pictograms, and safety data sheets. Your employer must provide training on your job-specific products to ensure you handle, store, and use them safely. It is also your responsibility under the Occupational Health and Safety Act to receive the training prior to the handling and use of new chemicals in your workplace. Thank you for joining us today for a Surge Learning presentation on WHMIS 2015 and the Globalized Harmonized System, Part 2.